I found that box in the attic today. I was up there looking for my old photo albums to show my granddaughter. My hands were brushing past dusty Christmas decorations and my late husband's old military trunk. Then my fingers closed on a plain cardboard shoebox, unlabeled and wedged tight behind the water heater. I didn't recognize it one bit. With a little tug, I got it loose. Inside, under a fine layer of grey dust, was just one item: a faded, tri-fold advertising flyer for a pizza parlor that's been closed for years, called Tony's Pie House. The address listed was on Maple Street. That's just 2 blocks from where that poor boy Michael was killed all those years ago. I turned the paper over. It was dated the very week he died. A cold, thick feeling settled right in the middle of my chest. My son, David, never worked there. He never even liked pizza much. Why on earth did he have this? I checked my watch. I had exactly 6 hours before David was supposed to drop the grandkids off for the weekend. I knew I needed to find out why this was in my house. My first thought was pure panic. I had to destroy it. I couldn't have this thing in my house. Not after what happened. Not with the lie I've built my whole life upon. Keeping it felt like a risk I couldn't even start to calculate. I took the box and started backing down the attic ladder, my old knees protesting with every step. That's when I heard a car door shut outside. I peered through the little circular attic window. David's blue sedan was already in my driveway, hours early. He wasn't alone. A man in a dark jacket stood next to him, and they were both looking up at the house. David never, ever brings friends over. I froze right there on the ladder, the box tucked tight under my arm. I couldn't go down now. I heard the front door open. He still has a key. "Mum," David's voice echoed up from the foyer. "You up there?" The attic hatch was still wide open. If he came up, he'd see me holding the box. I scrambled back onto the attic floorboards and shoved the box deep into its original spot behind the heater. Just then, his head appeared through the opening. His smile was warm, but it looked practiced. "There you are. Thought I'd come by early. Wanted to check on those gutters for you." He glanced around the cluttered space, but his eyes didn't linger on the water heater. I forced a smile back, my heart hammering hard against my ribs. He helped me down. As we descended, I realized the man in the jacket was gone. David didn't mention him at all. Later, while I was making coffee, I watched him from the kitchen window. He was standing in the backyard, staring right up at the attic window, talking quietly on his phone. When he came back inside, he kissed my cheek. "All secure, Mum. Oh, and I'll be by tomorrow to finally clear out that old attic junk, make some space for you." He left. I waited at the window until his car disappeared down the street. Then I went straight back up the ladder. My hands were shaking. I reached behind the water heater. The space was empty. The box was gone. The attic had been picked clean. It wasn't just that one shoebox missing. Entire sections of my stored memories were gone. David's old school trophies, my late husband's uniform case, several of those big sealed plastic bins. The emptiness felt surgical, deliberate. He must have done it while I was downstairs brewing my morning coffee, loading his car under the simple pretense of checking the gutters. My hands shook as I gripped the ladder. He knew. He knew I'd found it. That old community flyer was a trigger, a dangerous mistake he'd hidden and then forgotten for over 20 years. His early visit wasn't a happy coincidence. It was a clean-up operation. I had to get it back before he disposed of it for good. If I failed, everything we'd built would unravel. If that flyer connected David to that street, to that terrible night, the original investigation could be reopened. The man I'd let them blame, a poor drifter named Leo, had died in prison 10 years ago. But if the police found new evidence, I couldn't even finish the thought. I drove straight to David's modern suburban house. It's usually a 20-minute drive, but today it felt like an hour. Every traffic light a personal torment. I rehearsed my story. I needed to retrieve that box under some believable pretense. Maybe I'd say I suddenly remembered sentimental items, like my wedding band, tucked inside one of the bins he took. Dread was a physical thing, tightening my throat. What if I was too late? What if he'd already burned it? His house was quiet, his car notably absent from the driveway. I used my emergency key, the one he gave me years ago for watering plants. My first target was the garage. The side door was unlocked. Inside, neatly stacked against the wall, were the very bins from my attic. A spark of hope flared. I rushed over and began rifling through each one, my movements becoming frantic. I pushed aside old sweaters, high school textbooks, moth-eaten blankets from another lifetime. No shoebox, no flyer. My heart sank. Then I heard it, the low, growing hum of an electric motor. The main garage door was beginning to rise. Panic seized me. I ducked and scrambled behind David's bulky workbench, pressing myself against the cold wall. His sedan pulled slowly into the space. He didn't get out. He just sat there in the driver's seat, the engine idling. From my cramped hiding spot, I watched through the bench's metal shelves. He leaned over and opened the glove compartment. My breath caught. He removed a small, terribly familiar cardboard box, the shoebox. He didn't open it. He simply placed it carefully on the passenger seat, patted it once with a strange finality, and then put the car in reverse. He backed out, and the big door began its slow descent, sealing me in. The motor whirred, the rectangle of daylight shrank to a sliver, and then vanished. I was left in sudden, total, suffocating darkness. I was locked in. I was trapped. The absolute silence of my son's garage was broken only by the frantic, heavy thumping of my own heart. I was stranded on the wrong side of the big, empty vehicle space. Over there, 10 feet away in the deep dark, hung the manual release cord for the main garage door. I began to feel my way along the cold concrete wall, my fingers brushing past sharp tools hanging from hooks. My breath stayed shallow in my throat. My only goal now was to survive this. Get out without him ever knowing I was here. If David discovered me, well, the consequences were too terrible to even think about clearly. My hand finally closed on the nylon cord. I pulled. The door rattled upward a bare inch, then jerked to a stop, meeting solid resistance. A lock. He must have put an external padlock on the track when he left. I was sealed in. With a sinking dread, I fumbled for my phone. The screen glowed, showing no signal bars. This garage was a perfect concrete cave. I had to find another way. My eyes adjusted to the gloom, finding the outline of a side door that led into the house itself. It was locked tight with a deadbolt. I turned and searched the cluttered workbench for a key, my fingers slick with nervous sweat. I found nothing but loose nails and old receipts. The tension sat on my chest like a physical weight. My mind flashed to that cardboard box on his passenger seat. Where was he taking it right now? To burn the evidence? To hide it somewhere even deeper and darker? I yanked open a rusty utility drawer. Inside was a jumble of odds and ends, including a set of thin metal files. I'd never picked a lock in all my 76 years. But let me tell you, desperation is a very swift and determined teacher. I worked at that deadbolt, jiggling and probing, for what felt like endless hours, my ear constantly straining for the sound of his car returning. Finally, with a dull and forgiving click, the mechanism gave way. I pushed the door open and slipped silently into his house. The kitchen was unnervingly immaculate, everything in its place. I crept toward the front window to peek out at the driveway. It was still empty. As I turned, a splash of color on the polished granite countertop caught my eye. Next to a simple ceramic fruit bowl lay a single wrinkled piece of paper. It was the flyer for Tony's pie house. He hadn't taken it with him after all. He'd left it here, waiting in plain sight. It was a message. A cold realization washed over me. He knew I'd come. He knew I'd break in. My fingers trembled as I picked up the paper. I turned it over. On the back, in faded blue ink that hadn't been there this morning, was a handwritten list of 3 names. The first was Michael, the boy from the alley. The second was a woman's name, Sarah, from a cold case I only vaguely remembered from the local news years ago. My blood ran cold, seeing the third name, Leo, the drifter, the quiet, sad-eyed man I had let them convict. At the very bottom of the list, in David's distinct, neat printing, was a fresh note just for me. "Mum, we need to talk about your gardening." Our old code, from his troubled teen years, for a serious problem that couldn't be ignored. Just as the meaning hit me, the front door lock began to turn. I shoved the flyer into my cardigan pocket as David's door opened. He stepped in alone, keys jingling. He wasn't surprised to see me. His eyes went right to the empty spot on the counter where the flyer had been. A slow smile spread on his face. "Mum, I see you got my note." My focus snapped from escape to performance. I had to act normal. One wrong word, and I'd face a confrontation I couldn't win. "David, what on earth? Your note said gardening." I let my voice waver, playing the confused grandmother. He walked past me to the fridge for a water bottle. "I moved some old attic stuff. Found interesting things." He drank, watching me. "Like Dad's old fishing journal, remember?" I did. My husband loved fishing. David leaned on the counter. "Turns out Dad was a detailed note-taker, not just about fish. He wrote about people, things that worried him." The room grew tense. My husband died 8 years ago, suddenly. He never spoke of worries about David. "What things?" I whispered. "Observations," David said casually, like a license plate near the alley where Michael died. Or a young man, matching Leo's description, arguing with someone before the murder. Dad had quite an eye. He never told the police. He wrote that he was protecting his family. David's gaze was steady. "He wrote that he discussed it with you. You both agreed to stay quiet." The floor seemed to tilt. My husband knew. We never discussed it. David was lying, or my husband had kept a secret from us both. The journal was a wild card David now held. "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed. "Of course," he said smoothly. "It's past. Good to clear the air." He pushed off the counter. "Now, you have something of mine? A piece of trash from my car?" He held out his hand. He knew. I pulled the flyer from my pocket. He took it, folded it without looking, and tucked it away. "Thanks. I'll handle this. You should go home, Mum. The grandkids will be waiting." It was a dismissal. Walking to my car, I felt his eyes on my back. This wasn't an end. It was a show of power. He had the box, the flyer, and now a journal that could implicate him, me, and my dead husband. He had me cornered. I started the engine. In the rear view, I saw him still in the doorway, watching. My phone buzzed on the seat. A text from an unknown number. It was a photo of a page from a leather-bound journal, my husband's handwriting clear. The text read, "Page 47. Thought you'd want a keepsake." The page described seeing David, then 19, near the pizza parlor late the night Michael died. My husband had written one chilling question: what is my son capable of? I pulled over a couple blocks from David's house, my vision blurry. That photo on my phone felt like a punch. My husband's neat writing asked the question I'd avoided for 20 years. He had suspected. He had seen. And he'd said nothing. Why? To protect David? Or to protect me? The journal was now David's weapon. I had to see it. If I didn't, I'd have to surrender. He was showing me he controlled everything. I drove home on autopilot. The house felt strange now. I went straight to the living room closet, to the small fireproof lockbox bolted to the floor. I'd never opened it. After he died, I figured it was for papers. The key was on his ring in a kitchen drawer. My hands were steady, but cold. I got the key and opened the box. Inside, there were no bonds, just a stack of his fishing journals. On top was a sealed envelope with my name on it. I ignored that and grabbed the journal from the year Michael died. I found page 47. The entry was there, but David's photo had cut off the rest. My husband's writing went on. Saw D with the Bauer kid, arguing. D was upset. Followed him. He went to the quarry. Threw a cloth bundle into the deep water. Couldn't sleep. Told Evelyn. She said, let it go. For the family? I will. Evelyn. That's me. I never said that. He never told me. A silent scream filled my head. My husband had lied in his own journal. He made up a talk with me to explain his silence. I heard a car in the driveway. Too early for the kids. I put the journal back, locked the box, and hurried to the window. A county sheriff's car was there. 2 officers got out. Had David called them? About the journal? I fixed my cardigan, took a breath, and opened the door. The female officer gave a tight smile. Ma'am, sorry to bother you. We're following up on the old Michael Bauer case, reviewing witness statements. We need to confirm you stand by your original statement. She watched me closely. This wasn't just a review. It was a probe. David's pressure had just gotten official. From the corner of my eye, I saw his blue car glide past the end of my street, slowing for a second. A reminder. He was watching. I looked at the officer, at my old lie on her clipboard. Yes, I said, my voice clear. I stand by it. She nodded and made a note. As they turned to go, she paused. One more thing. The file shows an old anonymous tip. It came years after the conviction, suggesting the real culprit was a local teen with a violent history. The tip mentioned a connection to a Tony's Pie House flyer. Nothing came of it. Did you ever hear about that? The street was empty now. David was gone, but his trap was sprung. He hadn't just framed Leo. He'd planted a trail long ago, leading right to evidence he knew I'd find. He'd been planning this for 20 years. The officer waited for my answer. The officer's question about the flyer hung in the air. I kept my face still, a skill honed from years of lying. A flyer? No, I never heard about that. I shrugged. She studied me, then nodded and closed her clipboard. They drove off. I locked the door and slid down against it. Holding that composure made my bones tremble. David had sent them. He was showing me he could stir the pot with a single call. The old, anonymous tip was his work, misdirection to point at himself as a suspect. It was a safeguard. If the case reopened, that tip led to evidence he could control. By having the police mention it, he was demonstrating his reach. My phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number. See, I keep us safe. But you're digging, Mum. Digging is dangerous. Remember the quarry. The quarry. Where my husband's journal said he threw a bundle. I stood up, a grim purpose cutting through the fear. I had to know what was in that water. I changed clothes and drove out there, telling myself I was just going to look. The old limestone quarry was a flooded pit, surrounded by chain link. I found a rusted section of fence. The water was dark and still. The journal said the spot was near the old loading dock. I picked my way down the rocky slope. The dock was crumbled wood. I stared into the opaque water. I couldn't dive in. It was foolish. I turned to leave and my foot kicked something half buried, a bundle wrapped in rotten canvas. My heart stuttered. I pried it loose with a stick. It was a small, heavy bundle. The canvas fell apart, revealing a stained leather pouch. I unzipped it. Inside was a single item, a vintage switchblade with a mother-of-pearl handle. It was pristine. This wasn't a murder weapon tossed away. This was a trophy, carefully stored. It had been waiting here for me to find. My son had left a breadcrumb trail to his first prize. As the understanding chilled me, my phone rang. It was Jenny. Her voice was small and scared. "Grandma? Dad's acting weird. He says we're going on a surprise trip. He told me to pack my old teddy, the one you gave me." That bear had a security camera inside, a gift from David last Christmas. He knew I'd used it. He was taking my access, and he was taking her. Jenny's call short-circuited my panic. All thoughts of the knife, the quarry, the journal vanished. He had my granddaughter. Everything narrowed down to one clear point: get to Jenny before David left town. It would mean facing him directly, shattering the careful, poisonous peace we'd maintained for 20 years. I drove faster than I ever have, back toward his house. What terrified me was his lead time and his utter unpredictability. I called Jenny back, forcing calm into my voice. "Sweetie, put your dad on. Tell him it's about the attic." I heard muffled sounds, then David's voice, smooth and easy. "Mum, don't take her, David." I kept my tone flat, no pleading. "A little vacation. You're overwrought." I found the quarry. Silence. It stretched for 3 full seconds. "I have the pearl-handled knife. You left it for me to find. A test." More silence. Then he let out a soft, almost admiring sigh. "You always were sharper than Dad. Meet me at the lake house. Alone. Bring it. We'll talk. Then you can see Jenny." He hung up. The lake house was a secluded property my husband left him, a 3-hour drive north. It was a controlled environment, his territory. I knew what talk meant. It meant I had to choose between bringing evidence to a predator or losing my granddaughter. I couldn't go to the police. Not with that journal page, not with my own perjury. He'd take Jenny and disappear. I turned my car toward home first. I needed that knife. Back in my garage, I stared at the pouch. I couldn't give him the actual knife. I rifled through my late husband's workbench and found an old, generic pocket knife. I wrapped it in a similar cloth. It would have to do for a handoff. My real play was the teddy bear camera. If it was still online, I could see where he was. I opened the app on my tablet. The screen was live, showing a shaky, close-up view of car upholstery, the footwell of a vehicle. Jenny had done as I'd asked earlier. She'd placed the bear face down. I could hear the engine, the road noise. He was already driving, not toward the lake house. The highway signs were blurry, but I caught one. State Route 14 West. That was the opposite direction. He was lying. He wasn't going to the lake house. He was taking her somewhere else, and he'd sent me on a wild goose chase to get me out of the way. The feed flickered. Jenny's whispered voice came through, barely audible. "Grandma, I'm scared. He has a new bag. It has tools, shiny ones." Then David's voice, sharp. "Who are you talking to?" The feed went dead. The screen turned to grey static. He'd found the bear. The last thin thread connecting me to her snapped. The static on the tablet screen felt like a void opening under me. He had her. He knew I was monitoring, and he was heading west with a bag of tools. Negotiation was over. Now I had to follow, and I had to be smarter. It meant abandoning any pretense of normalcy, burning my life down as I drove. I grabbed the fake knife bundle, a real kitchen knife from the block, my wallet, and the tablet, hoping the app might retain location history. I was racing against his several-hour head start and the vast, unknown space of the Western Highway. I headed west on Route 14, my mind racing. The shiny tools Jenny mentioned. That could mean anything. Surgical tools. Restraints? My hands clenched the wheel. I needed a destination, not just a direction. I pulled into a rest stop and fumbled with the tablet. The app had a last known location pin. It showed a point on the map about 80 miles ahead, near the turnoff for the state forest. A sprawling, dense woodland with abandoned logging roads and old mining cabins. It was a perfect place to vanish. That had to be it. I called the only person I could think of, Ben, my husband's old fishing buddy, a retired forest ranger who knew those woods better than anyone. I lied smoothly. Ben? It's Evelyn. David's taking Jenny on a surprise camping trip up in the state forest. But he's not answering his phone, and I'm worried he's lost. He mentioned maybe using the old ranger cabins as a landmark. Which one would he likely use? Ben's voice was gravelly with sleep, but alert. The old cabins? Most are collapsed. Only one still has half a roof, the Miller Creek Watch Station. It's hard to find. Off Fire Road 7. Why would he go there? It's no place for a kid. I heard the suspicion. I poured on the grandmotherly worry. Oh, you know, David. Always the adventurer. Fire Road 7, you said? Thank you, Ben. I hung up before he could ask more. I had a destination. Miller Creek. I drove for 2 tense hours, the sun beginning to dip. I turned off the highway onto a gravel service road, then onto the washed-out dirt of Fire Road 7. My sedan was not made for this. It bottomed out with a sickening scrape. I had to stop. I was still miles from the cabin marker on my map. I got out into the silent, pine-scented dusk. I had to go on foot. I took the kitchen knife, the fake bundle, and a flashlight. As I locked the car, a pair of headlights appeared far down the main gravel road. They were moving slowly, deliberately. It wasn't David. He was already ahead. Someone else was coming. Ben? The police? I ducked into the tree line and watched. A dark pickup truck rolled to a stop right behind my car. The door opened. A man got out, shining a flashlight over my sedan's plates. It wasn't Ben. It was the man in the dark jacket I'd seen with David in my driveway days ago. He was real, and he was here. David hadn't come alone to the woods. He'd brought help. I froze behind a thick pine, the bark rough on my cheek. The man in the jacket circled my car, his flashlight probing the interior. He pulled out a radio and spoke into it. He was checking in. With David, this was coordinated. My focus shifted from pursuit to survival. I had to reach Jenny without being caught, even if it meant leaving my car. I watched as the man got back in his truck. He wasn't leaving. He was blocking the road, a guard at the gate. I had to go around. Using the trees for cover, I moved parallel to the fire road, heading deeper toward the Miller Creek cabin. The fading light made every route a hazard. My phone map was useless. I had only my memory of Ben's directions. The danger was real. The man behind me, the unknown ahead, the clock ticking for Jenny. After an hour of painful hiking, my old joints screaming. I saw a glow through the trees. Not firelight, the cool, blue-white glow of LED lanterns. I crept closer. A small clearing held a dilapidated wooden cabin with a sagging roof. One window was lit. David's blue sedan was parked beside it. A figure moved past the window. My breath caught. I had found them. I needed to see inside. I circled to the side, finding a gap where the chinking had fallen out. I peered through. The interior was one room. David stood over a camp table, pulling items from a black duffel bag. Jenny sat on a cot, wrapped in a blanket, watching him. She looked unharmed, but terrified. On the table, items gleamed. Small, clear plastic bags full of jewelry. Rings, necklaces, lockets, trophies. He was showing them to her. "This one," he said softly, holding up a silver locket, "was from the woman at the highway rest stop. She fought so hard." He was confessing to my granddaughter. This was his twisted way of bonding. My blood turned to ice. I saw the torn teddy bear discarded on the floor. Then I saw it. Propped against his duffel bag was a shotgun. I pulled back, my mind reeling. I had my kitchen knife. It was useless against a shotgun. I had to get Jenny out while he was distracted. I moved toward the front, planning to call her name softly, to lure her to a window. As I passed the corner, my foot landed on a hidden dry branch. The crack echoed in the silent woods. Inside, all movement stopped. The lantern light flicked off, plunging the clearing into gloom. David's voice called out, "Calm." "Mum, I know it's you. I saw your car. Come on in. We've been waiting." The cabin door stood slightly ajar, a rectangle of blackness. He was in there, armed, in the dark. And Jenny was in there with him. The open cabin door was a mouth. David's invitation hung in the cold air. Going in was suicide. Staying put was surrender. I needed a single desperate action. Create a diversion to pull him out, away from Jenny. It would mean revealing my position, making myself the target. I clutched the fake knife bundle. It was my only prop. I moved my voice away from the door, back toward the tree line. "David, I have it. The knife from the quarry." I threw the cloth-wrapped bundle into the center of the clearing. It landed with a soft thud. "It's all there. Take it and let Jenny go." Silence. Then the cabin door creaked wider. He emerged, a silhouette against the darker interior, the shotgun held loosely at his side. He didn't go for the bundle. He walked toward the spot where my voice had come from, his steps deliberate. "You shouldn't have come here, Mum. This is private family time." He was 10 feet from the trees. I was 15 feet to his left, crouched behind a stump. "Jenny needs to understand our legacy, the strength it takes to prune the weak." He stopped, scanning the trees. "You of all people should appreciate that. You pruned Leo for me." His words were meant to provoke, to draw me out. I stayed silent, my heart pounding in my ears. He sighed, a theatrical sound. He turned and walked toward the fake bundle, bending to pick it up. This was my chance. While he was distracted, I could rush the cabin. I tensed my legs, ready to spring. Just as he touched the cloth, his head snapped up. He wasn't looking at the bundle. He was looking past it, at the ground near my hiding spot. The LED lantern from inside suddenly flashed on, held by Jenny in the doorway. She was sobbing. "Grandma, run!" she screamed. The light illuminated my footprints clearly in the soft earth, leading right to my stump. David smiled, dropping the fake bundle. He raised the shotgun, not at me, but at the cabin door, at Jenny. "No more warnings, Mum. Stand up, now, or I start her education right here." The calculation was over. He had won. I couldn't let him point that gun at her for another second. I stood up, my hands in the air. All right. I'm up. Let her go, David. He swung the barrel toward me, his smile never fading. Of course. After we talk. He gestured with the gun toward the cabin. Inside, both of you. Jenny ran to me, clutching my waist. I held her tight as we walked toward the dark doorway. As we passed him, I saw his duffel bag was packed, ready to go. The table was empty. The jewelry was gone. He wasn't planning a long talk. He was planning a conclusion. He herded us inside and closed the door. In the lantern light, I saw the radio from the man in the jacket sitting on the cot. David picked it up. His voice was cheerful. All secure at the nest. Prepare for cleanup. He wasn't just a killer. He had an organization, a partner, and we were the mess that needed cleaning. The radio crackled with a reply. Copy. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes until cleanup. David put the radio down and kept the shotgun pointed at us. His calm was terrifying. He pointed to two rough chairs. Sit. Jenny clung to me as we sat. My kitchen knife was strapped to my ankle, useless now. We just had to survive the next 10 minutes and make one chance for Jenny to run. The empty plastic bags on the table showed our fate if we failed. David leaned on the table. You look at me like I'm a monster, Mum. But you built this. Your lie was the foundation. He picked up a silver ring. Leo was practice. You made it easy. After that, I understood. Truth is just the story that sticks. He was talking to pass the time. I needed his focus on me. Your father's journal, I said, my voice dry. You forged that page. David smiled with pleasure. Very good. I needed you to feel cornered, to make you run here. Dad's real journals are boring, but you believed it. You always believe the worst. He was right. I had believed it. Outside, an engine growled in the distance. Jenny squeezed my hand. David heard it. He straightened, his aim more intent. Time's up. I had to act. I let out a choked sob, doubling over. My heart, I gasped. Pills. In my pocket. David hesitated, annoyed. Grandma, Jenny cried. He took a step toward me, the barrel dipping. It was the chance. I kicked the table leg as hard as I could. The lantern and bags crashed down. Light spun, throwing wild shadows. David flinched aside. Jenny, the window, I yelled. She scrambled for the high window. David swung the gun toward her. I threw myself at his legs. We went down in a tangle. The shotgun fired with a deafening roar, blasting a hole in the wall. Plaster dust filled the air. I felt a searing pain in my side. David shoved me off and stood, grabbing for the gun. Outside, an engine roared right up to the cabin and stopped. Headlights shone through the new hole, lighting the dust. David had the shotgun again. He aimed it at me on the floor. But he didn't fire. He was looking past me, at the door. The man in the jacket stood there, pistol in hand, his face grim. He pointed it at David. Drop it, Dave, it's over. The world froze. David stared at his partner, the shotgun aimed at me. The man in the jacket, Carl, stood grimly in the doorway, pistol steady. I said, drop it. His voice was flat. This wasn't a rescue. It was a takeover. I pushed up on an elbow, my side screaming where pellets had grazed me. Jenny was frozen by the window. David's face showed cold understanding. What is this, Carl? Business, Carl said. You've gotten messy, sentimental, bringing family into it. He stepped inside, his eyes on the spilled jewelry. The inventory's worth a lot, but you're a liability now. Her showing up, the car left on the road. It's amateur hour. Carl was the real professional, and David had become a problem. I knew I had to survive this power struggle. David slowly lowered the shotgun to the floor. We can talk. Split everything 60-40. It's already 100-0, Carl said. He kicked the shotgun toward me, an odd gesture. It was just out of reach. Carl kept his eyes on David. Your mother's perjury story is the only thread. Once she's gone, the old case stays closed. The girl, too. Clean. He was saying this for me to hear. David lunged for the duffel bag. His hand came out with a hunting knife. Carl fired. The shot was deafening. David jerked back against the wall. A dark bloom spread on his shoulder. He slumped, dropping the knife. Carl watched him bleed. See? Messy. This was my moment. While Carl was focused on David, I inched my hand toward the shotgun. My side burned. My fingers brushed the cold barrel. Carl's head turned. He saw me. He sighed, disappointed, and swung his pistol my way. Don't. I stopped. He nodded to Jenny. You? Come stand by your grandma. Jenny, trembling, crept over and knelt beside me. Carl looked at David, who was breathing raggedly. You get to watch the cleanup. Then I'll decide about you. He raised the pistol, aiming at my forehead. I reached for Jenny's hand. Then, a new sound, the distant wail of a siren. One, then another, coming fast. Carl's eyes snapped to the window, his calm cracked. You called them? He hissed at David. David just coughed wetly. Carl made a decision. He grabbed the duffel bag, scooping jewelry into it. He backed to the door, pistol sweeping between us. He wasn't going to risk the shot with sirens so close. He vanished. I heard his truck roar to life and crash into the woods. The cabin filled with swirling red and blue lights. Shouts, doors slamming. David looked at me from the floor, his eyes holding a strange clarity. He mouthed, I'm sorry. Then his head lolled back. The police burst through the door. The cabin became a blur of uniforms and urgent voices. Paramedics swarmed David, lifting him onto a gurney. An officer wrapped Jenny in a blanket and led her outside. Another tended to my side with a pressure bandage, saying it was grazed and I needed a hospital. I nodded, but my eyes were on David as they carried him past, his face ashen. Detective Larson, a woman with sharp features and tired eyes, waited until David was loaded into an ambulance. She told me my neighbor Ben had called, worried after seeing a dark truck follow me. His call was the siren we heard. Carl was gone, vanished into the forest. At the county hospital, they stitched my side. Jenny was checked and declared unharmed, just in shock. She sat clutching a cup of hot chocolate. Detective Larson pulled up a chair. She said David was in surgery and would live, but he'd be arrested. They found the duffel bag in the woods with evidence linking to cold cases. Then she asked about my involvement, starting 20 years ago. This was the moment I'd dreaded for decades. The lie was over. Jenny was safe, and David was caught. Telling the truth would cost me my freedom, but I had to do it. I looked at Jenny, her eyes older now, and said, I'll tell you everything. I confessed it all. The night Michael Bauer died, David coming home bloody, my decision to frame Leo, the quarry, the pearl-handled knife, and the forged journal page. Larson listened, taking notes, her face unreadable. The man in the jacket, Larson said, is Carl Brennan. We've been after him for years for fencing stolen goods. Your son was his supplier. Brennan is in the wind, but we'll find him. She stood. You'll be charged with perjury and obstruction. Given your cooperation and your grandson's testimony, the DA will likely deal, but you will face consequences. I nodded. It was a price I was ready to pay. Later, they let me see David. He was in a secure room, handcuffed to the bed, drowsy from anesthesia. Machines beeped softly. I stood at the foot of his bed. His eyes opened and focused on me. "Mum?" he rasped. I didn't speak, just looked at the monster I had created. He said, "The first one, Michael. It was an accident. We fought. He fell. But after, I liked it. I liked that you fixed it." A tear traced down his temple. I turned and walked out. In the hallway, Larson was waiting. "He'll be transferred to a maximum security psychiatric unit. He won't see the outside again." I kept walking, back to the room where Jenny slept, curled in a chair. I sat beside her, watching her breathe. The external battle was over, but the internal one, the reckoning for choosing my monster over a stranger, was just beginning. 3 months later, the legal machinery had ground through its gears. My plea deal was settled. 5 years probation, a permanent criminal record, and 500 hours of community service at a victims' advocacy centre. The judge called it a balance of justice and mercy. I called it a lighter sentence than I deserved. David was declared unfit for trial and remanded to the state's secure forensic hospital for the rest of his natural life. Carl Brennan was still missing. The jewelry was returned to some families, offering a sliver of closure they'd never expected. I sold my house. The memories in every room were toxic. I used the money to buy a small, plain condo near Jenny and her mother, my daughter-in-law Susan, who had filed for divorce immediately. Susan let me see Jenny, cautiously, under supervision. Today was our first unsupervised outing, a trip to the botanical garden. Jenny was quiet on the drive. She'd been in therapy. So had I. We walked among the roses. The sun was warm. After a long silence, she spoke. "Grandma, do you think he was always bad? Or did we make him that way?" The question I asked myself every night. I stopped, looking at a perfect blood-red bloom. "I think some people are born with a crack in their soul, Jenny, and the people who love them, we spend our lives trying to paper over it, to pretend it's not there. We think love can fill it, but sometimes the crack just gets deeper, and our love just gives it more room to grow." It was the most honest thing I'd ever said to her. She took my hand. Her hand was warm and alive. "I'm glad you're my grandma," she said. Then, after a pause, "Even after everything." That even was the weight of our shared history. It was a burden we would both carry, but we would carry it together. We finished our walk and I drove her home. At her door, Susan gave me a tight, brief hug. Progress. Back in my empty condo, the silence was different. It wasn't waiting to be filled with dread. It was just quiet. I made a cup of tea and sat at my small table. There was one thing left to do. I took out a pen and a sheet of paper. I addressed it to the Innocence Project. I wrote about Leo, the drifter. I detailed the lies I told, the pressure I put on witnesses, the character I assassinated to save my son. I included the police report number and the date. I didn't ask for forgiveness or understanding. I just stated the facts as I knew them, and I signed my name. I stamped the envelope and walked to the mailbox on the corner. I dropped it in. Leo had no family that anyone knew of. He would likely never get a posthumous exoneration, but the truth would be in a file somewhere, and that was a small, brittle piece of justice. As I walked back, my steps felt lighter and heavier at the same time. My community service was at the harbour, a non-profit helping families of violent crime victims. My job was basic office work, filing, answering phones, making coffee. They knew who I was. The director, a stern woman named Mara, told me, "Your past is not an asset here. You will listen and work. That is your penance." I didn't argue. I listened. I heard mothers weep for murdered children. I saw the hollow eyes of husbands. I filed forms for counseling they couldn't afford. Their grief was a daily immersion in the consequences I helped enable. One afternoon, a woman came in. She was in her 50s, wearing a faded waitress uniform. Her name was Carol. Her sister, Sarah, was killed 12 years ago. Sarah's name was on the list in David's handwriting. My blood seemed to stop when I pulled her intake form. I was assigned to help her. It was a test, deliberate or cosmic, I didn't know. Carol talked in a flat voice. They never found who did it. Took her necklace, a silver locket with our baby picture inside. I remembered that locket. David had held it up. My hands went cold. I helped her fill out paperwork for a grief support group. My pen shook. When she finished, she looked right at me. "You seem like a kind woman. Thank you for listening." Her gratitude was a knife in a fresh wound. I just nodded. That night, it all became unbearable. The faces from the harbour, Carol's tired eyes, Leo's imagined face, they swirled together. I drove without a destination until I found myself on Maple Street, near the alley where it all began. The pizza parlour was gone, replaced by a laundromat. I parked and stood under a streetlight. I had come here for decades in my nightmares. Now I stood on the actual cracked pavement. I expected a feeling, a ghost. There was nothing, just the hum of dryers and the smell of detergent. The evil that started here was banal, a teenage argument. My sin was a conscious choice. The place itself held no drama. I got back in my car. Driving away, I realized I had been looking for a punishment the law didn't provide. But seeing Carol, standing in that alley, it wasn't punishment. It was a mirror. My life now was the consequence. The quiet condo, the wary family, the daily pain. This was the prison. It had no bars, but the walls were solid. I pulled into my parking space. Upstairs, silent rooms waited. I made tea and sat. I did not cry. I just existed in the quiet, vast space of the aftermath. For the first time, I didn't try to fill it. The story was over. Now there was only the living with it. The days at the harbour settled into a grim rhythm. I filed. I made coffee. I listened. I did not offer comfort. I had no right. My presence was a silent apology, accepted by some, met with stony silence by others. Mara, the director, watched me like a hawk. One Tuesday she called me into her office. She slid a folded newspaper across her desk. It was a local weekly. The headline read, "Cold Case Breakthroughs. New Evidence from Old Crimes." A paragraph was circled. It detailed how items recovered from an unnamed suspect had helped close several missing persons cases, including Sarah's. It mentioned the silver locket being returned to the family. Carol's family. Mara's eyes were hard. "Your son did that. You work here. Do you think that's justice?" I met her gaze. "No, it's a fragment. It doesn't balance anything." She held my look for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Keep filing." I left work that evening feeling the weight of that article. A fragment. That's all any of this was. David's capture, my confession, the returned jewellery. They were just pieces swept up after the explosion. The real damage was permanent. I drove to my probation officer's monthly check-in. Officer Grady was a pragmatic man in his 40s. He reviewed my community service logs. "Consistent. No violations? How's the housing?" "Adequate," I said. He scribbled a note. "And the mental health counselling?" "I attend," I said. He looked up. "You know, most people in your situation, they either fall apart or they get angry. You seem quiet." I didn't know how to answer that. "I am quiet," I said. He dismissed me. On the drive home, I took a detour past my old house. A young family lived there now. A bright plastic tricycle lay on its side on the lawn. Life had moved in. I felt no ownership, no nostalgia. It was just a building where terrible decisions had been made. I was about to drive on when I saw a car parked a little way down the street. A dark pickup truck. My breath hitched. It looked like Carl's truck. I slowed, my heart thumping. The truck was empty. The windows were tinted. It could be anyone's. Coincidence. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I drove straight to Susan's house instead of my condo. I needed to see Jenny, to see that she was safe. Susan answered, surprised. Jenny was doing homework. I made an excuse about dropping off a book. I stayed for 15 minutes, watching Jenny explain a math problem, her brow furrowed in concentration. The normalcy of it was a balm. When I left, the street was clear. No truck. I drove home, checking my mirror every few seconds. My quiet prison now held a new fear. That Carl was still out there, and he knew I was the one thread that could connect him to everything. I parked in my assigned spot, the underground garage, dim and cold. I sat for a long time, watching the shadows, before I dared to get out. The dark truck showed up again 2 days later. This time it was in the harbour's parking lot across the street when I left work. Same make, same model. It was too specific for coincidence. Carl was sending a message. He knew where I worked. He knew my routine. My probation forbade me from contacting known criminals, and reporting a suspicion without proof could be seen as a violation of my terms. I was trapped between his threat and the rules that kept me out of prison. I had to handle this alone. I decided to change my routine. I left work at random times, used different exits, asked a co-worker to walk me to my car. The truck didn't appear for a week. I began to think I'd imagined the threat. Then, on a rainy Thursday, I found a note tucked under my condo door. It was a single line, printed on plain paper. Old ladies shouldn't play detective. No signature. It was him. He'd been inside my building. The violation was absolute. My quiet space was breached. I called building security. They reviewed footage, but saw nothing helpful. A man in a hoodie, face obscured, entering behind a resident. They'd increase patrols. It was a weak shield. I couldn't live like this. Waiting. I had one card to play. I knew Carl was a businessman. His grievance was that I'd disrupted his operation. I needed to offer him a deal. Permanent silence for permanent distance. It was a dangerous gamble. I prepared a package. I printed out every news article about David's arrest and the recovered evidence. I wrote a single sentence on a blank page. I have copies of a full statement detailing your operation, held by my lawyer to be released if anything happens to me or my family. It was a bluff. I had no lawyer, and my statement to the police was already in their file. But Carl wouldn't know that. I addressed the envelope to a P.O. box listed in an old property record I found linked to Carl Brennan. I mailed it from a post office across town. The waiting was worse than the fear. Every sound in my condo was a threat. 4 days passed. No truck, no notes. On the 5th day, I received a postcard in the mail, a generic picture of a sunset. The message side was blank, except for a single stamped image, a small, black key. It was an answer, a symbol of a lock or an unlock. I didn't know what it meant. That evening, leaving the harbour, I saw the truck one final time. It was parked at the far end of the lot. As I approached my car, its headlights flashed once, briefly. Then it drove away, turning onto the main road and disappearing into traffic. The message was clear. He was acknowledging the stalemate. He would stay away as long as my silence held. The immediate danger had passed, but the watchfulness would remain. I got in my car, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. I had faced the last external monster. Now only the internal one remained. The key on the postcard became a paperweight on my kitchen table. I didn't know what it unlocked, and I decided I didn't need to. It was just an object. Carl kept his distance. The fragments of my old life were settled. My probation continued, uneventfully. The seasons turned. Jenny's 13th birthday arrived. Susan allowed a small party at their house. I was invited. I brought a gift, a simple leather journal. Not for secrets, but for dreams. She hugged me, a real hug, not a cautious one. During the party, she pulled me aside. "Grandma, I got an A on my history project. It was about justice systems." She paused. "I wrote about restorative justice. I didn't use our names, but I thought about it." I squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you," I said. And I was. She was building something from the rubble. A month later, at the harbour, Mara called me in again. Carol was there, the woman whose sister's locket had been returned. Carol smiled at me, a tired but genuine smile. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "The group you signed me up for. It helps. Having the locket back, it helps." She wasn't thanking me for my crime. She was thanking the person who had performed a small, administrative act of kindness. I accepted it for what it was. "I'm glad," I said. Later, Mara said, "She doesn't know who you are. I made that choice. Do you disagree?" I shook my head. It was the right choice. That weekend, I took a drive, not to any place of memory, but to the coast. I had never seen the Pacific. I walked on a cold, windy beach, the grey waves crashing with a sound that was huge and empty. I stood there for a long time, my coat whipping around me. I thought of Leo, of Michael, of Sarah, of all the names I didn't know. I didn't speak to them. I had no right. I just let the sound of the ocean fill the space where my excuses used to live. I drove home as the sun set. My condo was waiting, quiet and clean. I made a simple dinner. I sat by the window watching the streetlights come on one by one. There was no thunderclap of forgiveness, no dramatic peace. There was just a quiet evening in a room where an old woman lived. The story was told. The reckoning was daily. The love for my granddaughter was real. The scale would never balance, and I had stopped trying to make it. This was the rest of my life. It was enough. I washed my dish, dried it, and put it away. Then I went to bed, and I slept through the night.